People say there is a first time for everything. A first kiss, your first car, the unrequited first love. However, what does this mean in the grand scope of things? Are firsts more monumental because they are the first, or do we get better with practice? Do we remember our firsts as more important than they actually were, holding on to that magical moment as a mark of our past and future selves? Do our firsts outshine what comes next? On A First Time for Everything, we will explore with our guests their firsts and how those impacted the seconds, thirds, and even countless times after. Is the first the best or merely the beginning? Or worse, was the first the last because it was so bad? We will dig into the recesses of our memories and consider whether or not a first was the start of something amazing or something we'd rather not remember. Come along with me, Juliet Rose, as I put our guests in the hot seat to analyze their firsts and how they defined who they became. I promise you're in for a fun, although maybe bumpy ride. Good evening, everyone, and I'm for Jan. It's in the middle of the night, but good evening for the rest of us, and thank you for tuning in to A First Time for Everything. I'm your host, Juliet Rose, and this is a Go Indie Now production. And tonight for me, we're interviewing Jan Kotouc. Okay, and thank you so much for coming on. It is 1 a.m. where he is, so that is.
And it's already the 23rd where I am, so I'm literally talking to you from the future.
That's right. He's from the future, y'all. You don't get to do that very often. And so we're interviewing him tonight. And Jan, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you and your books.
Okay, so again, thank you for inviting me. And what a wonderful intro. I will start with that. What a wonderful intro. I'm honestly moved by that. It was like, so much like... And sometimes I'm the person that cries at McDonald's commercials, so this was like done for me. And yeah, so hello again. I am a writer from the Czech Republic. I'm based in Prague, Czech Republic. So as Juliet mentioned, it's 1 a.m. where I am now. And so luckily today I had some friends over and we had some little piece of like drinks and friendly chat. So the evening is continuing now, and I've been writing since I was 14. I've been publishing since 2009, and I'm what you would call a hybrid, or hi Jessica. What you would call a hybrid author, because on the Czech market I have two traditional publishers, and on the English speaking market I am a little bit of both. And I tried like all aspects, and I've written like around 20 books, mostly in science fiction and some alternative history. And I have submitted my stories in several anthologies and magazines. Apart from that, I'm also teaching English as a second language, but the number of my students is declining a little bit since COVID. And I also teach at the university. I teach right now creative writing and science fiction fantasy literature. So I'm trying to help the next generation write something as well. And as for my books on the English speaking market, I have a finished series. I should start with that finished series, and which is Central Imperium, the same book that you can see in the like wonderful frame that Juliet created. And that's like 4 parts space opera, empires rising and falling, like bad things going boom, as my translator explained that, and like heroes, emperors, factions fighting it off, and a hero who is an avid poker player and owns a bunny. Because I think there's not enough science fiction space opera stories with hero being poker player and owning a bunny.
Very good. And I should say Joe actually designed the layout, so I'll give Joe Compton the credit on that one.
I was praising you, but I can praise Joe as well.
I'll always take praise. It's not a problem. And do you have like a website, or where can people find your books?
Yeah, it's you can find it on Amazon if you type my name. You can find me on Facebook. I have an author's profile and my personal profile. If you type my name again, as you see it on the screen, you can find me. And I have my own website, which again is my name with no indentation .cz. And don't be afraid of the CZ. I have English mutation on the website as well, so it should automatically drop you in the language of your region.
Okay, very cool.
And yeah, so that's my series, and I would just mention a brilliant lady whose name is Isabel Stainsby, and she is my translator. And you probably guess that my English is rather good, but I still felt that you need a native speaker to translate book into their language from language they know. And I've been really fortunate to find Isabel, who's studied Czech language at Cambridge and translated my books. And we have one more book in the pipeline, and she's now working on the 6th book. So I've been working with her for several years, and she's just wonderful. Nice. And apart from my series, I also have a novella in Honor Harrington Anthology, which is a trad publishing thing by Bain Books, and that came out last year. And currently, what I'm working on right now is I'm expanding this novella into a novel on the request of David Weber, and which is really cool because David Weber is one of my biggest literary influences, and he also became a friend of mine, and now I'm writing a story for him, which is like
that's really cool. Yeah, it's like that circle comes around.
Yeah, it comes around. And I should mention that I first published my books in English on my own, and last year I moved to Novus Mundi Publishing, and you can also find my books on their website, Novus Mundi.
Okay.
And so I'm a hybrid freelance indie publisher and trad publisher. I've tried all flavors.
You've got it all covered. Yeah. I've done hybrid as well, and now I'm actually publishing for other people too. So that's really
I've done that as well.
See, really cool.
I have a friend. I published her book, and I'm sending her like her $20 every so often, and so on.
Every so often, yeah. Well, very cool. Well, we'll jump into some of these questions. Like I said, if we veer off, no big deal. The goal of this is just to have some fun. So we've introduced you. So let's talk about when you first knew that you wanted to be a writer, and then how did you go about accomplishing that?
Well, I would not say writer, but I've always been telling stories, since I was a kid. And I think, even though I am not an only child, I was always happiest when I was playing alone. And when I was a child and I was watching movies, I then replayed the movies and improved them, and constantly like what I would have done. And so I was like in this storytelling mood since as far ago as I remembered. And so, yeah, I was happiest when I was playing alone because I can be every character in the game. And so that happened, and then slowly writing became the venue for me to express the ideas. And that's like 2000 2001, and I started reading fan fiction, and that's actually where I started. I loved, and I still love Star Wars, and I was reading lots of Star Wars fan fiction, and some of them were really, really bad. And so at one point there's just something that clicks in your brain, and you were like, well, I could write this better, even after, if I have a brain aneurysm, I can write this better than this fanfic that I found online. So I decided to start trying that, and I've written one fan fiction and submitted it to a fan fiction website that actually had to be read and approved by someone. It's not just anyone can upload it. And to my complete bewilderment, they actually uploaded it there, and it was very bad, And the sad thing is you can still find it on the website, but I will not tell you the name of the website. But
all right, everybody, you got to look for that website.
It's really inclusive if you can, but it's in Czech, So and it took since then I've become friends with the lady who managed that website, and she told me the reason that my fan fiction was not very good, but it was different than all the other original Czech fan fiction, because it was in the days when Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was the brand new thing, and most of the fanfic writers were women, and B, most of them were love stories about self-insert heroine, and Qui-Gon Jinn falls in love with her, or Obi-Wan Kenobi falls in love with her, or Darth Maul falls in love with her. and I've written a story about a group of Jedi going to the planet to catch a bad guy. So it was different. It was bad, but it was different flavor of bad. So that's how my writing started. And a few years later, I decided to put together my own universe. I always been world builder, so I started building worlds, and then I started building stories in those worlds.
So do you do world building first? Like when you have an idea, do you start with the world and then come up with the rest of it?
Yeah, well, at the very beginning, I would say it's free association, and you're probably as a writer yourself, how you don't order it around. You just go with the flow, and sometimes you have an idea about a character, sometimes you have ideas about a plot point or about some specific thing about the universe. And that's actually part of writing that's not often talked about, but I really enjoy it. And I work on one project and I let my brain free associate other projects. So I'm writing one book, but I'm preparing something that I will write after that. And so, but yeah, I like world building, and I love it, and maybe it's because what I like to read. I mentioned David Weber. He is a wonderful world builder. I like Star Wars. It's a huge world. Of course, sometimes it's mutually exclusive or some things don't fit together, but it's part of the charm.
What are some of the challenges you find in world building? I'm not a great world builder. I'll say that I'm very character driven when I do a book. So I struggle more with world building. I have to really focus on that and think about it. But when you're doing it, since you love it, what is something that you do find challenging about world building?
It depends whenever I'm writing science fiction or alternative history, because of course, in both ways, in science fiction, when I, for example, invent new technologies, I need to be aware of the context. Often what writers have problems with, which I noticed even as a teacher, is that you create this wonderful technology here that's going to help you with this situation, but you don't realize that you have this different problem here that this new technology will also fix.
Okay.
So you need to do both somehow. And it's the same with fantasy. For example, often fantasy writers, they have this swords and sorcery and sort of medieval style environment, and then they went to the high seas and suddenly they have cannons on the ships. And I'm like, okay, but if you have cannons, why they don't have muskets?
Right.
and things like that.
And Jessica says half the fun is discovering just how large the world your stories can occur in. I think that would be my problem, though. Is I would just never end. It would just keep building and building and building.
When you are a world builder, you need to learn to figure out when to stop world building and just get on with it. And just 20 minutes ago, before I joined the chat here, I was writing a scene in the novel, and I was it was on meeting with the bad guys on some planet, and I just figured out, okay, they have very weird winters, so there's a blizzard outside, and I'm starting to thinking about the actual tilt of that planet, and then I'm like, no, don't need to worry about it right now. I just need to proceed with the bad guy dialogue, and I can add this stuff later. But when I write alternative history, it's different because, for example, we've now finished writing a story with a co-author, my good friend Lucia Lukačevičová, and it's a story that takes place in Bohemia, what is now Czech Republic, in 1848, after a global cataclysmic catastrophe. And I've written alternative histories before, but those were 200 years after the change. So after something changed. So I had more freedom, but now I need to figure out like, okay, this historical character, is he there, and what is he doing? Can I kill this historical person or not? And like sometimes you make a mistake and someone spots it like 3 years later, and you're like, okay, like, because this novel was expansion of a short story, and there was a mention that one character used to be in the gendarme, like these something paramilitary cops that's very like popular in Europe, still are in France, for example. And this historical friend wrote me an email like 3 years after it was published and says, gendarmes did not exist yet. They were created 2 years later. And I'm like, okay, I'm changing that in this new edition, whatever.
So when you're writing alternative history, do you feel like you have to stay really true to the facts of that history? Or do you feel like you can, since it's alternative, do you feel like you can kind of fudge things?
Yeah, well, again, it depends. But if, the novel that we've just finished like a few months ago, it's like few months after the change. So and it was in a very turbulent time in what is now Czech Republic. It was then part of the Austrian monarchy. And there was like revolutions all over Europe, and we have lots of history about what was going on. And we dropped this like cataclysmic catastrophe in the middle of it and let the people deal with that. So we did lots of research with my co-author Lucia, like what's going on, who is there, and I try to, like, of course the main character is fictional, but that's what Eric Flint says, like you choose characters that are under the scope of the history. Like history does not care about them. Like,
right.
You can make up your own peasant or your own
exactly.
Like, you don't make up your own kings if it's like a historical book. All the kings are documented.
That's really interesting. So let's talk about your first book. So when you decided you were going to write this first book, what was your inspiration, and like how did you really kind of buckle down and decide you were going to do that?
Oh, the inspiration question. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not counting the fan fiction, but my first like book that was my own universe. It's, as I said, I've been world building it, and at some point I just decided that I no longer want to write fanfic. I want to try something more, and I started creating universes, and then I had some ideas for stories, and I've written a novella. And it was a pretty long novella. It was almost a short novel. But anyway, and a friend told me about this competition that is called Karel Čapek's Prize. Karel Čapek is the Czech playwright who, among other things, invented the word robot. The word robot is invented by this guy, which is funny because his play where the robot first appear, they're actually more like androids. Now we would call them androids, but whatever.
Huh, that's cool.
But anyway, I submitted this to the competition and was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then started writing something else, which was like a new story in that universe. And 6 months later, the administrator of the competition tells me that I've won in that category, and my novella would be published in an anthology of like winning awards. There were like 5 short stories and like 5 little longer stories and 1 novella. And so I was happy and was like, yeah, cool, wonderful. And then she sent me another email like a day later, and she said, oh, by the way, one of the people on the judge panel in this competition is Mr. Egon Čierny from publishing house Poutník, and he wants to speak with you.
Ooh.
And so when I tell this story on panels and tell it to my writer friends, they don't talk to me for a few days. But yeah, Mr. Čierny wrote me an email and said, like, yeah, I was interested in your work, and I wonder if you can expand the novella into a novel. And I, for whatever reason, did not want to do that. Now that I'm older and wiser, I would do that. But I said to him, I have this novel from the same universe that I'm finishing, and would you be interested in that? And he said, yeah, show it to me. And I showed it to him, and he said, okay, finish it and I will publish it. I said, okay, cool, thank you. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, most people don't have it kind of fall into place like that. So that's really cool. Yeah. So let's go to the other side of this and talk about the first time you got a negative review. How did you handle it? Did you consider the information in it to like change anything, or did you just take it as not everybody likes what I do?
Well, that's actually happened like one day after the book was published, the review, I actually dedicated the book to David Weber because he really is my big inspiration and I love his books. And I knew that if it's published, people will compare it with the Honor Harrington series, which is Weber's most famous literary universe.
Right.
And so, like one day after it was published, there was like a review online on some website saying like, yeah, this is Honor Harrington fanfic, and the author is so stupid, and whatever. And it's the author of this like paragraph said it's considered it fanfic because it's in space and the main character happens to be a woman and she's in uniform, and so so that's like fanfic, like based on like by the same token, like you can say that every sci-fi story that has soldiers dropping on some planet is a Starship Troopers fanfic, so.
I'm going to put up. So JD said, haters are going to hate, but wow, that was very diligent. And then followed up with people need more joy and less douchiness.
Yeah, well, I think this person is really like, his issues. Well, I actually met this guy who wrote that for my first negative review. He's like active in the science fiction community here. And I've had a nice chat with him like a few years back on a rooftop of a hotel where one convention was held. Yeah, we actually went to the roof, and I did not push him down. There was some party in some room, and the window was open, and there was like, here was the window, and you have a roof like here, like from the next level below. And so we were walking on the roof, and he told me, I still don't like your works, but I appreciate what you are doing. So I was like, oh, thank you. I feel nice.
So did you know it was him when like you were talking to him? Did he say, "Hey, I'm the guy that wrote that crappy review"? Or
since in the next few years I got to know him, and he kept writing negative stuff about my work. But I guess that I respected his right to not like my stuff, and
right. I mean, that's usually people just don't like it, but they don't keep reading and reviewing it if they don't like it. So that's definitely
sometimes haters like for whatever, and I don't consider him like my big hater or whatever, but sometimes they just buy every book of you just to write a negative review.
Right,
they buy it. And once I had a hater that it was not hating me because of what I'm writing, but he was like mean to some friends online, and I like spoke for the friend, and he was like threatening me, I'm going to buy all your books and I'm going to burn them. And I'm like, you do know how book market works, right? By all means, like if it's yours, you bought it, as long as you buy it,
Right. And JD says, well, he says he might have a crush on you and be projecting, but he definitely has something about you. But then he said, a sale is a sale. And that is true to a degree. Even a review is a review, right? Like ultimately the reviews still add up. So we're going to get those negatives. It's still a review.
Yeah, but this was not Amazon review. This was like some Czech website with mostly reviews, and, it's okay. Like, and this guy is well known. So most people are like, yeah, he does not like this kind of stuff. And, it's obvious that he hates it, whatever.
Right. Yeah. JD actually had a question I thought was a good question. Do you think certain genres have more trolls than others? I definitely think they do. I've seen them, I've seen them in all genres, but there's definitely ones where people like spend their days, hating on something.
I would say that science fiction fantasy have probably more haters than, I don't know, romance literature or thrillers.
Yeah, I think so too. I feel like when I've heard people say they've gotten a lot of negative reviews, they usually write sci-fi fantasy. And then the reason people are not liking them is because ultimately they really don't like sci-fi fantasy. I had a negative review. I write horror, and I had a guy that gave me a negative review, but then he was like, I really don't like horror. And I thought, that was part of the review. I was like, well, why are you reading it then? But, ultimately you just got to move on from them, and sometimes I think reviews can be beneficial. Sometimes reviews are very constructive. They have things that people say, well, it was confusing here, or it's this. And I think that's good for a writer, for an author, because you can say, okay, maybe I didn't clarify that enough, and moving forward.
Well, I learned like not to read too many reviews and not to like overthink them. I still do read them sometimes, and I know I shouldn't, because it's like don't do self-harm, and
Right.
and I have like trusted first readers who I trust they will point out if I have some problems with the story. But I try not to like read reviews online, because like as one writer friend said, there are like two options. Either they will be really negative and they will depress you, or they will be super positive and your ego will grow, and neither of those two things will help you become a better writer.
Exactly. And Jessica says too, I don't read reviews a lot. And I found the same thing. I feel like if you read reviews a lot, you start to like use them as your barometer, and that's not smart. Like, because then you start thinking, maybe I'm not good, or maybe I'm really good. Maybe like, where you just need to focus on writing.
Yeah, and I don't really know how it is on Amazon, but I have some friends who in Czech Republic have been victims of review bombing, and it's just obvious. And it's not like they're not political, they are not active in any community. They may just irk the wrong person, but you can just tell, you go to some book database and they have this like half-star reviews, and all of them is just one word, and all from profiles that been created that day and review just that one book.
That's crazy. Yeah. And Christy was saying, she has, people that don't like her books, but then we'll keep reading them. And so I think some of that might even be, somebody today was talking, an author was saying that somebody had said something to them that didn't make any sense, but ultimately what it looked like, it was a trigger. Like they were trying to get interaction from her. And I think sometimes we see that too, like in reviews where people really don't like our stuff, but they do it because they're trying to get that interaction for whatever reason from us. So I think that's what is JD says, hold on. JD says, I read all my reviews, but do my best to take on board what's worthwhile and some people. And I'm not sharing your other comment, JD. That's not nice. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately like reviews serve a purpose, but we can't give them too much credence, because again, sometimes people read outside their genre. They don't even like it. Like the guy that didn't like horror, but read my horror book and then give it a negative review. I had to go, yeah, I'm not going to take that personally. Like you don't even like it. They could be having a bad day. Maybe it kind of twinged a thing in them about something in their own personal life, so I think that it's good to, be aware of your reviews. I mean, if you're getting a lot of negative reviews, that might be something to pay attention to, but like, you can't let one negative review ruin your day.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah. Okay. So going on, so we talked about your first story. Let's talk about, you said you teach creative writing, correct? So what is advice that you give to your students about, like, if they want to publish something, they want to put something out there? What is like the first advice that you give to them on their writing?
I was tempted to say don't read online reviews, but that's what I'm advising them, but not the first thing I'm advising them on. I think, well, depends on what level the student is. But for example, at the university I teach freshmen, so people who are like 19 or 20 and they're just starting, and it's like a fun class for them. But I say, it's important to just keep writing, even if you are the worst writer in the world and you write 15 stories, then I guess I'm willing to bet that story number 15 would be much better than story number 1. And
hopefully,
hopefully, well, not counting Butt-Putt, but it's like with any other endeavor, you learn by doing, and that's the first step. And so that's for writing part. And of course, like when we teach, we discuss like lots of things, like from characters, world building, plotting. But I recently said it somewhere that while I am a world builder, I'm willing to forgive a lot in the story, as long as if I know that I understand what the characters are doing and why they are doing it, you know, because
Right.
I need to understand the character. Even if it's a super villain, I need to know, like, okay, as the cliche is, no monster sees monster in the mirror. Like, I need to understand why they are doing what they are doing, and sometimes in stories that there's a problem, like, why is the character doing this? Why is the hero doing that?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm willing to forgive a lot as long as I know why the characters are doing what they are doing.
That's a fair point. It's interesting because sometimes you hear people say, would you read what is it, a bad book with like badly written but with a good storyline, or a good bad storyline that's well written? I think ultimately, like, that's a good point that you made about, we do need to know what the characters are doing. And that I've read books where, like, you're like, what is going on? Like, in their heads, like, why are they doing the thing that they're doing? It doesn't make sense. And for me, it definitely taints a book for me if I don't understand what the characters' motivations are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, if you know this, then you're halfway there. Of course, you can always improve your spelling, obviously, but I can.
Right.
And then I noticed that the more experienced a writer is, the less adverbs they're using. I think there's a natural progression. Like, I think the person who invents AI macro that's going to randomly cut every third adjective from any book is going to be very rich, and the book is going to be much better. It doesn't matter which adjective you cut. But
that's interesting.
That's one thing. And then, as for, and your second question, if I remember correctly, was about publishing, what advice I give them about publishing. And lots of the students are not, like, they're freshmen, they are not even thinking in those terms. But I have a very proud moment recently, because one of my students published a short story in a magazine, and that story was her final project in my class. And I really enjoyed, like, working on that story with her, because she submitted the first draft and I made some comments, and she still passed the class because it was already, like, a good enough story. And then she did a wonderful thing, and very professional mindset, showed a really professional mindset. She said, if I do some corrections and rewrite it a little, would you read it again, like, outside of class? I said, yes, sure. And let's give it a target. So let's submit it to this magazine. And I know the chief editor. I will not guarantee he's going to publish it. The only thing I can guarantee is introduction. He can say no or he can say yes. That's his choice. And I'm not, like, arm twisting him to accept your story, but I can guarantee it will not fall into spam folder. And so we did that. And the chief editor in question is an easily distracted person. So then we were kicking him and reminding him to read that for like 5 months. And then he finally did that, and then he said, okay, I will publish it. And that's not my credit, that's my student's credit. If I may have taught her something, but she's super smart and she would have figured all these things anyway.
It's a good goal, Jessica. I agree. And then I'm just going to touch base. I know we touched base on this in the beginning. Again, we're talking to Jan Kotouc. Get it right this time? And so we talked about what languages you publish in, but would you go ahead and just kind of refresh what languages you publish in, and kind of about your translator again?
Yeah, okay. Most of my books are in Czech, which is my surprise, which is my mother tongue. And I write in Czech. I had 4 books translated and published. Book number 5 is in the pipeline, translated by my wonderful translator, Isabel Stainsby, who is she's from Great Britain. She is based in Scotland, and she studied Czech at Cambridge.
That's cool.
And we've met like 5 years ago or something like that. Maybe, I think it's maybe even 6 years ago. And I've been working with her for a long time, and I just enjoy working with her. And so these books in English are now published by Novus Mundi Publishing. And I've also written something directly in English, which is, for example, the novella in the Honor Harrington anthology, and the anthology is called What Prize Victory.
When you write that in English directly, do you still have someone look over it for like terminology? You do, yeah.
And I'm, even from like friends, I think this novella was also proofread by Isabel as well.
Okay.
And yeah, it was. And of course, right now I'm writing the novel in English, and that will definitely be looked upon by someone else as well. But this novel technically has 3 people working on it, and 2 of them are Americans, and the third one is me. So I have 2 other people who will read it before it even gets to the publisher. So
that's good. Yeah, I use beta readers for that same reason too. I want to make sure, because I just can't catch everything. So that way, before it goes to somebody professional, it's already gone through multiple eyes, and I feel like that definitely helps. And remind me, so you wrote your first book in what year?
Well, I wrote it the year before, but it was published in 2009.
2009. And then how many books have you published? I mean, how many books do you currently have?
On the Czech market, which is everything I have in English has also been published on the Czech market so far. But I think 20 books on the Czech market, because I have 2 books that are in the pipeline with my publisher that are going to be published in the next 2 months or so. And when I was writing them, I had this like vague idea that these are number 19 and 20, and they're like two-parter. And
that's really impressive. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and so since 2009, I've roughly published 1 book a year, and then around 2017, it moved slowly to 2 books a year, and so I'm not sure if that counts as some first. It's first something, definitely, And and I've been calling myself a full-time writer. Well, full-time writer since 2020, because COVID did that to me, because
right, it kind of forced us off.
There was no teaching, and by accident of publishing schedule, it happened that in 2020 I had 3 new books come out and no teaching gigs. So I said, okay, I guess I'm writing for a living now. What choice I have?
Right.
I can do that or starve.
Right.
Very sad. But and then the publishing market got complicated, and my personal life got complicated, and I have not published new book in 2 years. So.
It happens, but it gives you time to market too, which is good, because I think I do that too. Like I tend to, when I kind of got back into writing, I started really cramming it out there, and then like I got tired. And so this year I haven't, but I've had more time then to market the books I already have, which is good too. It's important, because when I was putting them out there really fast, I was kind of forgetting how important it was to market too.
Yeah.
So I think that's
definitely
good.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And I'm not sure if this crisis hit America as well, but in Europe there was a paper shortage. Like there was paper, but like what was more expensive.
I definitely heard that at the time.
More expensive. And
publishers were upping their prices because of paper costs.
Yeah, so it was everywhere, and for example, my publisher learned the hard way that even if you like prepay your paper in the printers, in like the printing company, it's no guarantee, because a bigger boss can come in and say, that's nice, but return the money to the publisher and you need to print this.
Right.
That's unfortunately what could happen as well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So kind of getting back on the first idea. So firsts are hard. Like obviously the first time we do something, a lot of times it's a failure. Now, do you see that first? So say you publish something and 10 years later, you look back and you cringe a little and you say, oh, that could have been better. Do you go back and change that, or do you let it stand as kind of a mark of the progress that you've made?
Yeah, well, with trad publishing, you don't have that. When you publish something at Amazon, it's easy. I click on edit or upload to file or whatever. It's up there in 24 hours. With trad publishing, it's impossible. But sometimes when my publisher does reprints and we spot some typo or mistake, like we fix that, but it's mostly like typos or small things. I'm not rewriting like a third of the book or anything like that. Yeah. But for example, I was preparing my first novel, the one from 2009, like for new edition. And when I was doing that, I like polished it a little, but it was mostly stylistic things, like cutting out adverbs and cutting out adjectives and saying weird signal phrases when you could just write he said, and stuff like that. But I was not changing the story because, well, I still think the story is good. I may not write it the same way now, but the question is not like, could I write it better now? The question is, could I have written it better then?
Could you have?
Well, I did. Apparently, I didn't. So I think my toolbox was what it was back then. But yeah. So for example, like when I look at my first novel, I know there are things I would do differently. But since the book was the first in a series of 7 books, then I cannot really do significant story changes because it would
change everything. It's a butterfly effect, right?
Books, I cannot really do that. So I think I've added like few lines here and there, like to explain some stuff more that was not clear.
Yeah.
I think that was the maximum of my involvement.
And I think that's really all you should do, because I feel like otherwise you're like kind of writing a new story altogether. Like like you have this original story. And I have a friend who's an author, and she's like, no matter what, she goes, once I put it out there, other than like that, like minor typos, she's like, I don't change it because people have already read that story. And then if I change it and I put out a second book, then they're confused because they read that story. And now there's this story and this, this story. So, and I always think that it was really good advice, because I was like, you know what, we grow. And there's kind of the question of, are you embarrassed by that, or are you proud of it? And for me, I always still stand on the proud. I did it. I was younger. I learned since then. So obviously it would be better now, but I still did it.
Yeah, definitely. Now there was something very smart I wanted to add, and I forget what it was. So I guess
hopefully
it will come back to me, or it won't.
Hopefully it pops back up. So here's a fun question I always ask everybody. What is a first you would rather forget?
First thing I would rather forget, writing-wise.
It could be any. But
in personal life, we have all kinds of stuff that, the one time you've been very embarrassed when you were 5 years old. I can list like several hundred instances like that, and I think most stuff would be probably like from personal life that's really like I'm not going to get into, but I think I'm not going to say it was a good experience. It was a good experience, but like there were like stuff and like these small embarrassments from childhood and whatever. But let's I think people would be more interested in whatever writing related I can think of. And I think I did with one of my books. I did pretty lousy book launch where I was not so talkative as I am now, and I am an introvert that's pretending to be extrovert. So I'm nice and cheerful, and I talk a lot. And after we finish here, I will go to a quiet room, and I will be there alone for some time. But
that's me.
I remember now it was a book launch that I had really A-list writer to be the patron, like the one to spill champagne on the book and something, and I was not yet skilled, and I was not really able to moderate it, and I was not really smart enough yet at those days to get some external moderator, and so so I did not really know what to say, and the big name writer on the Czech market who was like the patron of the book, he also was not very talkative guy, so it was a little embarrassing, and so I learned my lesson, and actually tomorrow I am moderating a book launch of 2 of my friends and of their books, which actually we've been scheduled tomorrow, and apparently I'm known to be good at this now because their publisher asked me if I would do that, so and so why not let me promote my friends, and they have written books that are in Czech, so you cannot read those, but whatever. And One is a wonderful first book in a space opera by my good friend Maria Domska, which is called cool cover. It's called Nejasné hranice, which is like unclear borders, as in space, like between empires. And she has written lots of sequels. And I consider myself fast writer. I'm not so fast as Maria, And right now we are like mutually cheering each other. We have this like Excel sheet where we write how many words we have written at each day, and I'm always embarrassed.
That's awesome. No, a word is a word, right? Like,
and the other is a fantasy by another friend of mine, which is Zuzana Hartmanová. It says bones under the moss, as in this thingy that grows on trees.
Right.
And it's a fantasy about minotaurs. Like the minotaurs are the protagonists.
Well, tell them they need to get those in English so I can read them. I said, tell them they need to get them in English so I can read them.
Yeah, well, actually, Maria, the first one I mentioned, she may have a short story from that universe translated into English this year. We will see.
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. Let's see. So we have a couple comments. JD says, warts and all, I love my book babies. I agree. Christy said, my first book won an award, so I can't complain too much. Mine did too. And that was I originally put in for awards because I was doubting myself, and that helped me say, okay, maybe I can write.
Yeah, I noticed that when you friended me on Facebook a few days ago, I noticed you wrote something about awards and people like complaining about awards or something like that.
Yeah. I think people get, and I don't know if it's, honestly, I mean, I've won a lot of awards, and the reason I originally started doing it was because I did go indie, and I was like, I wanted to vet for myself. I wanted to say, yes, I should be doing this. And then there were people that were getting like, oh, well, you whatever, not to me specifically. I just heard them kind of generally complaining about awards. If you don't want to do them, don't do them. But for a lot of us, it kind of helped us break through that barrier of being indie. And I'm hybrid as well, so I do both. But when I first put out my own book, I wanted to say, yes, I should have done this. And so people are just people, whatever.
Of course, literary award on the English-speaking market, they have their like annual controversies, like what it is this year, and
we always have controversies. I'll just say that there's always something going on in the writing world that people are complaining about.
And this year I'm attending WorldCon in Glasgow, and
I've heard about that.
Yeah, and I think I got the email like, now you can vote for Hugo Award, yay! And I'm like, I honestly need to think about what to vote for, if to vote, because I think it would not be fair for me to vote for things I have not read. And there are lots of controversies, but I think the writer Eric Flint put it most succinctly, like you can complain about politics or whatever, but what it comes down to is demographics, because 30 years ago, even if you have not read all books, you could at least be aware of all the books that were published in the genre, and now it's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. So of course there are going to be cliques that are going to cheer for their friends.
Exactly. There's a lot more popularity kind of contests going on versus I guess skill. And I just try to stay out of that. Honestly, like I feel like I'm going to read a book that appeals to me. It doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter if I've never heard of them. If it appeals to me, if the cover appeals to me, like that last one you showed with the skull. Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. I'm like, I kind of want to read that. I'm going to read it. So like, but we do live in a world, I think in the writing world now, there's so many clicks and there's so much popularity and there's so many like coattail writing, and you just have to like shake it off and walk away from that and just know that what you're doing is of quality. And that's all that matters. And then Jessica said, I love all my stories and my novel. It's been a good ride so far. And I've read Jessica's book, really good as well. She's good at world building too. That's a skill. I like I said, I'm not bad at it, but I'm not an expert.
I don't think we've met with Jessica, but we've been Facebook friends for how long, Jessica? And we are both in the Honor Harrington fan club, and we've been talking about writing several times. And I think we are both teachers, no?
You are, because Jessica we live not too far from each other, so we've met in person at an event. So, and I know she's a teacher as well, but yeah, for sure. Let's see, what time is it? All right, I'm gonna pause this and I'm going to do the spinning wheel. This is just fun. And Jessica said at least 7 years that you guys have known each other. That's good. I've only known Jessica probably maybe 3 or 4. I know it was before COVID, I think, but I don't quite remember. Everything's a blur since then.
Yeah, well, the years are getting faster and faster. And I told you about the student of mine who published the book in the short story in the magazine, and I was really happy with that. And of course, they need your author bio, and she was not sure what to write there because this story was her debut, and so I was like advising her. But of course, the bio is in the format name, parentheses, year of birth, and then a short text. And thanks to that, I realized that she's been she's been born in 2003, and suddenly I was like, yeah, I feel old.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I've been writing 2 years longer than she's alive, So.
Yeah. And I was gonna say it's kind of funny because on the bio or on a blurb, like we can write a whole book, but then someone says write a bio, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't know what's right.
Okay, the wheel.
All right, let's do the wheel. So I'm going to present this. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you see the wheel?
Yes.
All right, let's give it a spin and see what it lands on. Okay, so what was the first R-rated movie you ever saw?
I'm not sure. Okay. I think that I was like 5 or 6, and we got like barely illegal video cassettes with some other movie. I think it was one of the Police Academy movies, and then we realized that RoboCop 2 was the next movie on the cassette, and so I watched it, and I think RoboCop 2 was my first R-rated movie, and I think it deeply traumatized me, but I guess I turn out okay, and I'm not murdering people in the street. I just murder them in my books, So
right.
That's good, and actually I've mentioned this RoboCop story in some interview, and my mother read that, and she was really like scared. Like she was like, "Am I a bad parent but for letting you watch this?" And my older brother said, "Well, I remember the cassette. It was the resolution was so poor that
you can't see anything anyway.
I couldn't see anything anyway, So I was like,
it's like when we try to watch things through like the static.
It was like an audio.
I think I saw something.
An audiobook or something.
Well, it's funny because I'm a child of the 70s. So my mother and my stepfather would throw us in the back of their station wagon because they wanted to go to the movies and it was drive-in. So they would be like, they'll go to sleep. So they would drive us to drive and we'd play, and then they'd play this movie. It would usually be R-rated. I never remember any of the specific movies. I just remember like being this kid and peering out and seeing horrible things. They thought we were sleeping, First one I actually saw and I remembered was I went to a sleepover when I was, 10 years old, and they were playing The Howling. And it terrified me. I watched it. I was like, I'm going to watch this because everybody else is watching it. Got to be cool, right? And so I was watching it, and I literally would not go upstairs after that. Like I was so afraid to go up the stairs if it was dark. So yeah, that was my first official, I think, outside of the drive-in movies where, like I said, I don't remember any of the actual movies. I just remember scenes that were pretty terrible. It was the 70s. Everything was terrible. So, All right, let's spin the wheel again.
Okay.
All right. First best friend. I wasn't sure where it was going.
Yeah. Okay. I've not for a long time I was never thinking like best friend. Like I had lots of friends, and like which one is the best? It's not a popularity contest. But no, there was a friend that I had in grammar school that for many years been my best friend, and we've been like sitting next to each other and doing stuff together, and so I haven't seen him for many years, but well, we are friends on Facebook, so if that counts. And
that counts. Yeah.
And his name was Mickey, which is like a Czech short for Mikuláš, which in English would be Nicholas, So
Okay.
It's like the same name, like from biblical period.
Right.
But yeah, we called him Mickey, and so we were playing games, and 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 when we were like when we had writing assignments in school, he always wrote something better than me.
Is he a writer?
No,
No.
he's not a writer, but he did like his writing assignments in those days were really great. He was really
cool.
good at writing assignments in school when we were like 6th grade or 7th grade or something.
That's funny. Yeah, I was kind of like you. I really didn't really use the term best friend, and so like I had friends that was always like the friend I hung out with. I think the first time I really used best friend was high school, actually. So like because I was just it was a weird like I just didn't like the word. I still don't love it. It's not what I think I love, but so yeah, I still like I have my close friends.
The Wheel of Fortune thingy.
Yeah. I got one more spin. Let's see what we get here.
Now I'm getting scared.
Uh-oh, could be a bad one.
Should ask you some random questions.
Let's see. First job. Well, that's not bad.
Yeah. I wonder if it's okay, if it's like a student summer job or a first 9 to 4 job. But okay, I will choose the 9 to 4 job. It was in the last year of my study, and it was actually a bad decision. But well, I learned what I never ever want to do in my life, and that was a job in logistics. And that was like logistics office in Prague for overseas shipping. Those of you who are like geographically skilled, you may realize that Czech Republic is a landlocked country.
I was a little confused there.
Yeah, but we had like offices there on the like for a ship logistics company, and I was studying my master's, and one of my classmates was like older, and he was already a manager in this company, and for whatever reason I felt like I need to have this job as well. I need to have a job, even though I was like still a student. So like no one expected me to have a full-time job, but I was like doing distance studies and everything. So I said, well, let's have a job. And yeah, well, it was a good experience, and the people there were nice, and I'm happy that because I was there, I like directed some my other friends there, and they are still in that company and they are happy. So I guess some good came out of it, but I just realized after a year and a half that I don't want to do this, and it's like soul crushing. And I was already writing back then, and I haven't finished a book in a year and a half in those days, like because I was like I started this book before I started working in logistics, and I haven't finished it until I quit and left.
Yeah, I think we all have that. I was corporate America, and same thing. I couldn't do stuff.
Yeah,
just kills your soul.
Yeah, it was just like ridiculous, and you are doing like you need to do the same crazy stuff over and over, and you need to discuss things over email with colleagues in countries that have much worse English than we had, and yeah, but there are lots of good that came out of the job. I still have friends from there, and actually got some ideas for one book series for the alternative history there, because as much as I hate the question, where do you get your inspiration, with this series I know, because I had this like it's like a mouse pad but bigger for under the keyboard, and it was like map of the world, and I was looking at it and was like playing, yeah, what if we had global flood there and I can move my ship here, and then I started writing alternative history about that, and that was my first book that can be on the Czech market. It can be considered a bestseller. Of course, what is bestseller? People argue about it all the time. What is a bestseller? And
right, yeah.
Remember, Czech Republic has about the same population as Michigan. So,
okay, yeah.
So imagine selling your books in English and only your sales in Michigan count.
Right. All right, so let's go ahead and have you just kind of tell the audience again where they can find your books, and if you have any upcoming events or anything that they should know about.
Okay, so you can find my books on Amazon. If you type my name, I will jump out. You can find me on Facebook. I have my author's page and my private page. Again, type my name. It's very easy. I don't have any weird pen name. And if you are scared by the little thingy above the C in the last letter of my name, you can just type normal C and it will still find it. That's how smart internet is. And I have my website, which is again my name with no indentation .cz, which is the international code for Czech website. And I'm also published by Novus Mundi overseas, in America. Which by overseas I mean in America, and Novus Mundi again is, you can find it if you type Novus Mundi Publishing, and of course the Honor Harrington novella is published by trad publisher Bain Books, where I'm writing the Honor Harrington novel right now, and I think that's our old channels. Well, technically you can find me on Instagram as well, but I'm very boring on Instagram, so I do sometimes I do picture of a ship or a picture of my book, yes, or a picture of my Lego, because I need a hobby and I'm what is called adult fan of Lego. So I buy the expensive Lego sets and I build them as models. So sometimes I post
That's
it.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, and for upcoming events, well, most of them are happening in the Czech Republic. So I guess most of you will not be able to attend. But I do plan on being at Worldcon in Glasgow in August.
In August. Okay, I was going to ask you that because I have a couple of friends going to that, so I wasn't sure. So that's really cool. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. This was a really fun chat, and I look forward to checking out your work. And to our audience, thank you for everybody who's really chatty tonight, which is super awesome.
Thank you for wonderfully moderating it. It's been great. I had a great time. And even though it's 2 a.m., I don't feel tired at all.
Well, you might 10 minutes from now, you might be like, all right, I'm going to bed. Or you might have another drink. Who knows?
While preparing for this, I had coffee at 10 p.m. So I wonder how long I will last. But...
Oh, no. Oh, no. Awesome. And thank you to our audience. And we appreciate everybody listening in. This will also be available on YouTube after tonight. So check it out. And remember, it's always time for Go Indie Now.
Go Indie.